Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this is the new Skoda Octavia. One of the first cars that Skoda brought out under Volkswagen ownership was the Mark 1 Octavia, and it was a huge hit for the Czech brand. People loved that they could have an inexpensive big family hatchback that was comfortable, well built and insanely practical. Yes, granted it had a bit of a whiff of the Volkswagen parts bin about it. But roll on to 2013 when the Mark 3 Octavia came out and something started to change. All of a sudden you couldn't buy a Volkswagen Golf without having a look to see what Skoda had done with the Octavia. And it must have had some effect because I bought a Mark 3 VRS back in 2013. I just wish I'd gone for a petrol over the diesel because I'd probably still have it today. Never mind. But now roll on to 2020 and we have this, the new Mark 4 Octavia. Now I do say new Octavia, but it is still on the MQB chassis, same as the Volkswagen Golf, Seat Leon and Audi A3. So despite them being new cars, yes, they still have the same platform underneath. Now I've had this new Octavia for a week and I'm going to let you know if it still retains all the key features that make the Octavia great, but also, is it finally time to consider the Skoda over the Volkswagen? Style-wise, well, I definitely think Skoda have done a brilliant job with this new Octavia. In fact, it looks like a baby Superb, and that's no bad thing because the new Superb is a really good looking car. But with this Octavia, they've got all the proportions just right. In fact, it actually looks quite comparable to the Audi A3. But don't forget, the Octavia is still a hatchback, not a saloon. And I just love the all-over styling of this new car. It looks very distinctive, looks very elegant and business-like at the same time. Now granted, I don't actually think that this silver paint job is doing the Octavia any favours. Something like a quartz grey or race blue will definitely help it stand out. And I can't wait for the new VRS to come out, which comes out in late 2020, because that looks even more aggressive and it even comes as a hybrid for the first time. But you know what? I think that's enough of looking at the outside of this new Octavia. Let's have a little look at the inside. Sat in the front of the Skoda Octavia, you are greeted by a very comfortable and very minimalistically designed interior. Now, I do apologise if you have watched my Seat Leon and Volkswagen Golf reviews, because you're probably thinking I'm reading from the same script. But here's where things are going to change. I personally think that the Octavia's interior is better than the Volkswagen Golfs. Now, bear with me because I am going to prove my point. So firstly, getting in and out of the Octavia is really easy because the doors open nice and wide, and then getting into the Octavia, you are greeted by these very lovely and comfortable seats. They even hold a big bear like me in place, and I love the combination of Alcantara and leatherette on the materials. Now on this SEL first edition, they have got electrically adjustable driver's seat, so getting the perfect driving position is easy because the steering wheel has both rake and reach adjustment, so that is really handy. And next comes interior quality. So just like the Volkswagen Golf, we've got soft touch plastics on top of the dash, on top of the doors, we've got leatherette here on the door panel, on the armrest and the centre armrest. We've also got a bit of metal-like trim, okay, it is plastic, here on the centre part of the dashboard to give a bit of a lift and boost to the cabin. Now compared to the Golf, that's basically what it would have. But this is what the Octavia's got. We've got a panel here with Alcantara and stitching on there to give it a really premium look. But we've also got more soft touch plastics down here, just below the metal effect trim. So this actually surpasses the Golf for interior quality. Now yes, lower down we have got hard scratchy plastics, but this just takes what the Golf had and just goes up to 11. I'm genuinely surprised by the interior of the Octavia. It feels like a much nicer car. And then it comes to cubby spaces, which are actually really good in the Octavia. We've got some very decent sized door bins, which you can get a medium sized bottle of drink in, and they are lined with fabric, so loose items won't rattle around all over the place. We have got the little cubby space underneath the light switches, which is really handy because they've now disappeared from the Leon and the Volkswagen Golf. And then in front of the gear lever, we've got a little space there for your mobile phone, and we've also got two USB-C charging inputs. Then behind the gear lever, we've got two cup holders, which have got some little plastic holders and actually got some little plastic grippers so you can put a bottle in and undo the lid without the actual bottle spinning around. And what I like as well, there's actually a cover for the cup holders, so you could actually put some loose change in there and it's not going to be seen. We've also got a little extra space there, which I think is actually really handy for the key, and also I really like the design on this new Skoda key, same as the Leon and the Volkswagen Golf. It just looks very expensive and very premium. Do like that. And then we've got the armrest, which underneath we've got a bit of extra space. There's a bit of rubber lining at the bottom, but it's about the same as the Leons and the Volkswagen Golf. And then we have got the glove box, which is of a decent size. It's about the same as the Leon and the Golf once again, but it is lined with fabric, so loose items won't rattle around in there. I couldn't say that about the Volkswagen Golf. So it shows in terms of cost cutting, Volkswagen have done a bit more than Skoda. And then we've got the infotainment system, which is set quite high up on the dash, but not too high as to obstruct your view. And in terms of the digital display and the infotainment screen setup, it's more comparable to the Leon than the Golf, where the Golf's kind of merges in with the digital display. But what I like as well, and it's definitely means that the infotainment system is better than the Seat Leons, and in some ways the Volkswagen Golfs, is we have got shortcut buttons here. So we've got one that says set, so that's to do things like your tyre pressure sensors, your start-stop button. We've got your drive mode select, which does your sport, eco and normal. Your park assist, so that the Skoda Octavia will park itself. We've got your hazard light button, your central locking button, your climate control button, so this adjusts your climate control and the fan strength, etc. And then we've got your demister for the rear window and the front as well. So unlike the Golf and the Leon, where those two buttons are kind of put with the light switches, Skoda have actually made it ergonomically more sound by putting them here by the infotainment system. So that I really do like. And just in general, it's, yeah, it is a really nice place to be in here. And also, I really love this new steering wheel. It's a two-spoke steering wheel. Who would have thought that in a Skoda? But it's kind of to pay homage with earlier Skodas from the probably early 1900s. But it's had a nice redesign. It actually looks really expensive. And I do like the feel and dampening of the buttons. Only thing is that the scrolling buttons in the centre, which have this silver knurling on them, they do feel a little bit cheap. And that's the other thing as well, is that this silver metal effect trim actually looks cheap as well compared to the Leon and the Golf. If we had the brushed aluminium effect here, then I would definitely say it was absolutely fine, but it just, yeah, it just feels a little bit cheap and tacky. So perhaps that's where Skoda's been doing a bit of its cost cutting. But all in all, it's just a really, really lovely place to be. I am genuinely surprised by the quality in here of this new Octavia. And in fact, the design, I think, is really nice as well. And again, better than the Volkswagen Golfs. I think the Golfs now, compared to this, looks a little bit boring. And this actually has a bit more interest to it. But it's not as fussy as the Seat Leons, which had protruding air vents at an angle and everything. But all in all, yeah, I am really impressed with the interior of this new Skoda Octavia. And unlike the touch-sensitive buttons you got on the Leon and the Golf to operate the light switches, they're actually physical buttons, and they do feel really nice. I'm not sure, however, if I prefer them or the old little switch that was on a rotary thing to these new ones here. Sorry, I've got a giant horsefly on the interior. But anyway, that's enough of the front of the Skoda Octavia. Let's have a little look at the back. Sat in the back of the Skoda Octavia, it is a lovely, spacious place to be. We wouldn't expect anything less. Now, that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a huge amount of knee room, and headroom is pretty good as well. You can easily get a couple of 6-footers sat in the back of the Octavia. Now, cubby spaces are really good as well. We've got some very decent sized door bins, and they are again lined with fabric. We've also got some aeroplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats. We've also got an additional pocket, which is perfect for putting your mobile phone in. So that is something. We then have the centre armrest. Pull him down, and we've got a couple of extra cup holders, and actually there's a little clip in here so you can put a pen in there. So that is really handy. But also for additional space, we can load through from the boot into the rear seats. So if you have got any skis or any long items, then that is a really handy feature. There's also like a little shelf here, but that's clearly where the tri-zone climate control would be. But we've also got two USB-C inputs there just underneath. And then when it comes to ISOFIX supports, we got them on the outer seats, and whereas usually with Volkswagen Group cars there's actually a detachable clip which is easy to lose and easy to break, on the Skoda they just kind of flick up, so it is actually really easy to affix a child seat. And what's really handy on the new Octavia is that the front passenger seat also comes with ISOFIX support, so that really is handy if you've got 3 kids in the car and you've been quite a randy bugger. But all in all, it's just really lovely here in the back of the Octavia. Now granted, yes, interior quality has taken a step downwards from the front. We have got hard scratchy plastics, but the windows are of a really decent size and they do open all the way down, so that is handy. But yeah, I really like it back here in the back of the Octavia. Plenty of room, and I could easily imagine myself doing a long journey sat in the back of the Octavia and coming out the other end all nice and relaxed. And you know what? I think that's enough of looking at the back seats of the Octavia. Let's have a little look at that boot. Opening the boot of the Skoda Octavia presents you with, and are you ready for this? 600 litres of space, which is so far ahead of anything else in this segment. To give you an idea, a Volkswagen Golf's boot is 220 litres less than the Octavia's. Now that is something, considering that they are the same car underneath. And it's not devoid of features either. We have got some really sturdy tethering hooks, we've got a 12-volt socket, we've got a couple of these shopping hooks as well, and also we've got the ski chute that I mentioned earlier. But also, if you want to get the seats flat, you just got to do it at the pull of a lever, which is nice and simple. But it does bring up a couple of flaws with the Octavia's boot. Firstly, on the hatchback, there is a quite substantial boot lip to navigate over. So if you are regularly putting heavy items into your Octavia, I do recommend the estate version and opting for the variable boot floor. And also with the seats down, you do actually see there is a bit of a ledge at the base of the seats. So again, any large, heavy, bulky items might take a bit of navigating to get them over that ledge. But other than that, it's absolutely brilliant. Oh, and you can't really put the parcel shelf underneath the boot floor. Again, you'd probably have to look at the estate version with a variable boot floor to get the space to put the tonneau cover away. But I am just hugely impressed with this new Octavia, and I cannot believe they've increased the boot capacity on this new car, even though it is just 10 litres. 600 litres is actually what you get in some estate cars in this segment, and that's really only where there are some competitors with the Octavia, because with the Golf and the Leon they do actually have roughly the same boot capacity. So when comparing the hatchback, let's not look at the class it's in, let's look at the class above. So here you can see the Skoda Octavia's boot capacity, and here you can see the Ford Mondeo. How about the Vauxhall Insignia, and just as a comparison, the Skoda Superb. So it does make you wonder, is it worth going for the Superb over the hatchback? Because they are quite similar when it comes to boot capacities. That is one you're going to have to think about. But you know what? I think that's enough of looking at the boot capacity of this Skoda Octavia. Let's take it for a drive. Once you get driving in the Skoda Octavia, first impressions are really good. It's a lovely, comfortable, easy car to drive. Now, visibility has always been an Achilles heel for the Octavia, particularly in hatchback form, and this new Mark IV is no exception. So we have got some reasonably thick A-pillars, but they're not too bad, pretty much the same as everything else around in the segment, but I've not found myself looking around them at any junctions, which is a blessing. However, looking over your shoulder, you do find you've got quite a pronounced C-pillar because of that fastback design, but luckily on this SEL First Edition, we have got blind spot monitoring. And also rear visibility is a bit restrictive because of the fact that the rear screen rakes so much, so it's quite a narrow aperture. But if you are reversing, one of the positives is that you do get rear parking sensors as standard, so that is a bonus. But all in all, you do get used to the visibility of the Octavia quite quickly, but it is just a really lovely place to be. If you have had an Octavia in the past, this new one will feel right at home, but at the same time it will feel like such an improvement over the Mark III. So yeah, first impressions are really good. So trim levels in the Octavia range, well, at the moment there are 4 to choose from, and I am expecting more trim levels to become available as time goes on. So we have got the entry level SE First Edition. We then have the SE Technology, which is mainly reserved for fleet and business drivers, the SEL, and this, the top of the range SEL First Edition. Now, if you're after the SEL First Edition, I will mention now it is only available whilst stocks last. So if you really do want the new Octavia, then I do recommend getting out there straight away. So my pick of the range was actually going to be this SEL First Edition, but I'm going to have to go down one to the SEL because that will technically be, for the moment, top of the range. And I mean, this SEL First Edition has got everything that you really need. I mean, it has got a couple of optional extras, and if you look in the description below you can see what those options are, but I've got things like the metallic paint, a head-up display, and the space saver spare wheel. Now personally, I wouldn't bother with the head-up display. The digital display here in front of the steering wheel is just really lovely. It's lovely and clear, nice and precise and crisp in its animations, and gives you all the information you really need. And using the button on the right hand side of the steering wheel, you can navigate through the menus that kind of come across on the left and right hand side of the screen, very much the same way as the Seat Leon and the Volkswagen Golf, although with the Octavia it's a little bit trickier because you've got this rocker switch which you have to press a couple of times to go through what you want to do and then scroll through the various menus. So it does take a little bit of getting used to. But yeah, if you can get it, definitely go for the SEL First Edition. However, if you can't, go for the SEL and add on top of it. Engine choices in the Octavia range, well, at the moment we've got 5 to choose from, and just like the trim levels, I am expecting more to become available as time goes on. Now we've got 2 entry-level 1 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol units producing 108 brake horsepower, and they're mated to either a 6-speed manual or 7-speed DSG. However, the 7-speed DSG is actually an E-Tech engine, which is Skoda's way of saying it's actually a mild hybrid. We then have a more powerful 1.5 litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine producing 148 brake horsepower, and that's mated to a 6-speed manual only. Now I am expecting a DSG version of that engine to come out soon, and that will probably be called an ETSI because it will be a mild hybrid as well. And then diesel wise, well, we've got 2 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged units producing 114 brake horsepower, which is what I've got here, and 148 brake horsepower. Now the one that I've got is only mated to a 6-speed manual, but the more powerful 2-litre diesel is mated to a 7-speed DSG. So it's not got the wide engine variety you can have compared to the Leon and the Golf, but as I said, I am expecting that to change as time goes on. And this 2-litre turbocharged diesel engine with its 114 brake horsepower is actually really nice. I mean, it's got about 300 Newton meters of torque, so it's got plenty of pull with it. And then as you put your foot down, it's not too bad. Yes, there is diesel grumble at idle and when you put your foot down, but if I just let the engine get to 70 miles an hour, it just settles down. It's a really nice engine. I can't hear the engine at all now. It's really nice. It's actually really surprising. Now, Skoda say I should get about 65 miles per gallon, and I do believe them, because driving around town I can get around 45 to 50 mpg, but I have done a couple of longer journeys and I have managed to achieve 62 miles per gallon, as you can see here. So I do believe Skoda in letting me know that I could probably achieve that 65 on a longer journey. And yeah, in terms of the diesel, it's really nice. Now, would it be my pick of the engines? Probably not. I would probably say go for the 1.5 litre TSI. But if you are a fleet driver or business driver and you do a lot of motorway miles, then you're not going to go wrong with this 2 litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel. But if you want a more relaxing drive, then I'd recommend going for the DSG, which is the higher powered diesel. So it just means then that if you're in traffic, you know, you're not having to change gear on a regular basis. And speaking of gears, well, the 6-speed manual is really lovely. It's got a nice slick shift to it. There's a little bit of notchiness, and I like to call it a positive notch. You do get the feeling that you are fully in the gear when you select it, which is always a good thing. And the DSG, I will mention, does come with that new little gear selector, which we first saw on the Porsche 911. But yeah, in terms of diesels, this is absolutely fine. If you do a lot of motorway miles, this is the perfect engine for you. I've got no complaints whatsoever. So what's the ride and handling like in the new Octavia? Well, ride-wise, it's a big improvement over the Mark III. I actually think this rides really well. And it rides best at speed when you're on the motorway or any kind of A road doing about 50 to 70 miles an hour, because it deals with the bumps and imperfections really well. Granted, some of the bigger potholes will kind of boom and be a little bit intrusive into the cabin. But say below 30 miles an hour, it does suffer from a traditional Skoda trait, whereas for the most part, it's absolutely lovely and comfortable, but it can be a little bit jolted and unsettled if you go over a poor road surface or you go over any kind of potholes or manhole covers. It just kind of, yeah, it just feels a little bit unsettled. Something like the Golf does feel a bit more composed, but for the most part, you're not really going to be too bothered by it. And the way this thing goes over speed bumps is amazing. I mean, it feels really floaty. Like, I've got one of the options with the car, which is the dynamic chassis control. I actually haven't got that option, but when I go over a speed bump, there is quite a lot of movement in terms of pitch going forwards and backwards, and it makes me think I have got that optional extra, because it means that when you're driving on the motorway, this just, it soaks up the bumps and it soaks up the miles so effortlessly. It is really nice. And then there's the refinement side, which is again not too bad. When the engine settles at 70 miles an hour, it's lovely. You can barely hear it. There is a little bit of wind noise coming off the A-pillar and a little bit of tyre roar, but again, that's about it. It does a very good job of kind of masking some of its bulk as you're driving around on a longer journey. But then comes the handling side of it, which, of course, the Octavia is never going to handle as sweetly as a Golf, as a Leon, as a Ford Focus. We know that because of the size of the Octavia. There's a lot of mass it's got to shift, but it does a very competent job of it. Now, firstly, the steering wheel. As I mentioned, I love the new design of this wheel, the 2-spoke design. Okay, if you go for the VRS, it is a 3-spoke design, keeping it very sporty, but it feels really nice in my hands. The buttons are really well damped, and it's a really nice thickness as well. And then when you're going around the bumps, I mean, literally there, I just hit a pothole doing about 40 miles an hour, and it did kind of boom into the cabin. But going around the corners, it does it very competently. There's a little bit of lean in the corners. There's a little bit of roll. Again, it's just showing a little bit of its mass coming through there. But for everyday driving, it's absolutely fine. There's a good amount of steering feel. Okay, there's not the hugest amount of steering feel, but it's enough for you to know pretty much what the front wheels are doing on everyday driving. So yeah, it's just kind of, it's kind of like the Golf. I mean, it does everything really well. I mean, the one area where it does stand out and it is the king is when it comes to practicality, but compared to the Mark III, this is a huge step upwards for refinement. And the way the Octavia drives, I am thoroughly impressed by it. Now, in my time with the Octavia, have I come across any little niggles that I need to let you know about? Well, not with the car per se in my time with it, but I have gone through the options list, and there is something I should probably let you know about before you go and order an Octavia, particularly with the hatchback. There is a free of charge option available to you, and without any hesitation, you need to tick that box, and it is the rear wiper. For some reason, Skoda are allowing it to be a free of charge optional extra. So if you don't tick that box and you're not told by the salesman, you could come away with an Octavia without a rear wiper. And if your car's been sat around whilst it's been raining, oh boy, because the amount of water as you accelerate that just goes pouring onto that rear screen is immense, and it completely blocks your rear vision. So just make sure, if you are looking to buy the hatchback, make sure you tick that option in the box. Make sure you get that rear wiper. They did do this before, I do recall, with the Mark III Superb, and I think Skoda learned their lesson with the Superb, but they haven't learnt it yet with the new Octavia. So that's just something to be aware of. So I've just talked about the niggle with the Skoda Octavia. I now want to go on to the simply clever features, because I didn't mention these earlier. Now, if you've had a Skoda before, then you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, then let me explain. Skoda have got this ability to put little features on the car that you would never have thought of, yet they make life a lot easier for you. So we have the traditional one. We've got a ticket holder here in the A pillar. We've got the traditional umbrella now in the doors of the Octavia. Under the petrol filler cap, we've also got an ice scraper, which doubles as a magnifying glass, so you can read your tyre pressure monitoring. But we have got a couple of new ones. So the first one is underneath the bonnet, where if you are topping up your washer fluid, you can actually make a funnel with the washer cap. So therefore you don't spill any of your washer fluid, which I think is an absolutely brilliant idea. And again, I can't believe no one's thought of that before. It's so simply clever. And then there's the new one, which I had to look around for it at first, because when I saw the spec sheet for the Octavia SEL First Edition, it said it comes with 5 USB-C inputs. Well, as I showed you earlier, I've got 2 at the front, there's 2 at the back, so where is this 5th one? And it's in the weirdest place, but for the best reason. It's actually up here, just above the rear view mirror. And it's designed for dash cameras. I mean, that is a brilliant idea. Again, I'm surprised no one else has thought of that. So I just wanted to point out these brilliant, simply clever features that Skoda are renowned for, but it seems to be every time a new vehicle comes out, they come up with a new idea for it, and whoever comes up with these ideas, I hope they're getting paid enough. Well, clearly they are, because they're coming up with some brilliant things that just make life that little bit easier for you. So what are my thoughts on the new Skoda Octavia? Well, compared to its predecessor, it beats it in almost every single aspect. I think the infotainment system is the one area where it kind of goes backwards, but it's more practical, it rides better, it handles better, and feels much more premium here on the inside. And then I did actually think, whilst I had the Octavia, would I have this over a Superb? And I think the answer is yes, or at least until the new Superb comes out in a couple of years' time, because this actually feels like a nicer car than the Superb, which is a very odd thing to say. And then finally, to answer the question I posed right at the beginning, is it now time for you to look at the Octavia before you look at the Volkswagen Golf? And I think the answer is yes. This just feels like a nicer car. Granted, the practicality side, yes, no one can touch the Octavia in that regard, but this feels nicer on the inside than the Golf. Granted, it doesn't ride and handle as well as the Golf, but it's very fine margins in terms of the ride and handling. And that's the thing, I never thought I'd say you've got to go for the Octavia over the Golf, but I do say that now. This is the king of the family hatchback segment, and I can't believe I'm saying that. Skoda have worked so hard to get this car where they want it to be, and I think Volkswagen are going to be a little bit annoyed because I think they've built a better Volkswagen Golf. I think you'll go from this and into a Golf and you'll think the Golf's a little bit boring. Yeah, the new Skoda Octavia, king of the hatchback segment, and yeah, has dethroned the Volkswagen Golf, in my opinion anyway. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the new Skoda Octavia. As always, please like the video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. If you've got any questions about the Octavia and my time with it, or is it Octavia? I don't know, everyone pronounces it differently. But anyway, put your comments down below. Are you a new Octavia owner, and have I missed anything out? Please let me know. As always, I'm on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and I always advise you follow me on there for additional content, including live videos and still images of vehicles that I have for review, and also vehicles I just happen to come across. But guys, I hope you have yourselves a wonderful day. Stay safe, maintain your social distancing, wear a mask when you're in the shops, and yeah, don't forget to wash your hands as well. But have a wonderful day, and I will catch you all in the next video. So take care and bye-bye.